Now, we bring you the following live press announcement from D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. Our regularly scheduled program will resume following the announcement.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C. Today, I'm joined by members of my administration as well as federal partners to talk about public safety in the District of Columbia. We're located at 441 4th Street Northwest in the Marion Barry building, which is one of our government buildings. Joining me at the table are the Chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, Robert Conti, the Director of the District's Gun Violence Prevention Efforts, Linda Harley Harper, the Executive Director of the Office of Neighborhood and Engagement, Dale McFadden, the Director of the Office of Budget and Performance, Jenny Reed, as well as our federal partners from the ATF, TJ Barmandi, from the FBI, Robert Benstein, and from the United States Marshal Service, Lamont Ruffin. We have a longish situational update, so bear with us while we get through a lot of very important information, and then we will, of course, have time for your questions. Let me start by thanking members of the Metropolitan Police Department and the United States Capitol Police who testified before Congress yesterday. We know that Washingtonians and millions of Americans watched their courageous testimony yesterday, and we're grateful for their heroic service that day and for all of the officers who were present, who defended the Capitol and saved lives. So we are grateful to our officers, but we know that they represent hundreds of officers who responded that day, who suffered both physically and mentally. So we keep them in our thoughts and prayers. I want to move on now to our public safety update. We have been talking over several days, and certainly we have been focused in the government very intensely this year, as we are every day, on an uptick in violence in our community. We have seen a troubling and too often tragic rise in gun violence, and we saw shooting incidents escalate last year during the pandemic. This year, we've continued to experience an unacceptable level of gun violence. And while we've actually seen a slight dip in where we were with gunshots, those gunshots have proven to be more fatal. We recognize, of course, that gun violence is a national crisis. We also know that we have a responsibility to do everything possible locally to protect our residents and prevent that violence from happening in DC neighborhoods. We will never accept it as normal, and we will never throw our hands up against it. We will try. You have my commitment as your mayor to do everything in my power to keep our neighborhoods and our children safe, as well as all of us who are going about our daily lives, supporting our families, going to work, enjoying the DC neighborhood streets and parks, you name it. We know that in order to be successful, we need to put all of our partners at the table together and work on how to stop gun violence. That includes our offices and all executive agencies, the council, federal and local prosecutors, the courts, federal and local supervision agencies, and of course the community. We know there will be long-term tactics, and we know that there will be solutions that overlap and things that we need to focus on in the short term. And in the short term, I have directed the Metropolitan Police Department to use any overtime necessary to increase their presence in neighborhoods most affected by gun violence. Every resident in every part of our city deserves to feel safe walking around and letting their children play, of course. And what we hear time and time again from every resident, and especially residents in the hardest hit neighborhoods, is that they want to see greater police presence. Of course, in addition to adding overtime, we have a number of interventions in place, not just at MPD, but across all of the agencies represented here today. The chief will be able to speak more about the number of a number of interventions put in place by MPD, but I want to highlight a few that he's been working with our police leaders and our police officers. For example, launching the task force around carjackings, a community-focused patrol unit, a partnership with the ATF to support the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, mandatory overtime to support policing needs, the appointment of an executive assistant chief, and expanded requirements for community outreach. And those examples include 100 blocks in 100 days, the Green Team Keeping It Clean initiative as well. We're also in the midst of the Summer Crime Initiative, which the chief has a lot of experience with over a number of years, where we see increased police presence and initiatives leading to decreases in crime. And so overall, trends in those targeted neighborhoods are headed in the right direction compared to last summer. So we know, for example, in those Summer Crime Initiative areas where we have hosted a lot of events already, we see violent crime down, including homicides and property crime. So the total crime down in those Summer Crime Initiative areas. So those types of strategies we know can work elsewhere in the District of Columbia as well. I also need to make a point about force strength, which we sent a notice to the council about our overtime needs, and that they may see those overtime expenses increase over the summer months while we ensure that we have the presence that we need. We also know that overtime is not the complete solution, because the chief has to make decisions about how to keep the force fresh, rested, and in the best position to make good decisions. And so that's why we have called on the council to make sure they fully fund the needs of the Metropolitan Police Department. Last year, unfortunately, we saw a $15 million reduction in our budget, and because of that reduction, we have not been able to keep the hiring pipeline in full effect. So MPD usually trains 250 new officers annually. This year, that pipeline ground to a halt, and we had just 42 new hires. 21 cadets became recruits, 12 reinstatements, and 8 senior police officer and 1 new leadership official. No new recruit classes were hired. So over the past few months, we have seen renewed interest in joining the Metropolitan Police Department. And fortunately, we are replenishing our pipeline. It's no longer empty, but we need adequate funding to move forward. So I will be sending an additional $11 million supplemental budget request to the council this week to allow for the hiring of 20 new officers in FY21 and 150 new officers in FY22. We believe MPD is well positioned to identify and hire the additional officers and help close the gap between hiring and attrition as soon as possible. And we know, of course, and we'll turn to some more MPD updates in a minute, but we know, of course, that our strategy is multifaceted. You can see here we've also stepped up our in-person services at the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement that is led by Del McFadden, who has also joined me at the table. And we know that one major problem during the pandemic was not enough people in our community getting in-person check-ins and supports. Quite frankly, that they need to stay on track. And that's part of why I felt it was so critical to get DC government returned fully in person, so that our residents have access to these much needed services. The ONE's office will also be expanding its in-school leadership academy. The very successful Pathways program is returning in person for participants as well as graduates of the program. And our violence interrupters, who are responsible for maintaining regular connections with residents throughout the community, will be expected also to provide in-person services. Already in 2021, our violence interrupters have made over 3,700 touches with individuals at risk of becoming victims of gun crime or perpetrating gun crime. And of course, I also want to pay special attention to a new program that we initiated this year called Building Blocks. And we have been joined by its director, Linda Harley Harper, who continues to work with the community to build out our Building Blocks approach, which concentrates on those blocks in DC where we have experienced the most gun crime. The team has already activated in 41 blocks across 15 communities. They've completed neighborhood action planning meetings in several communities, including Galen Terrace, Frederick Douglass, communities in Anacostia, as well as in Kenilworth, Paradise, and Mayfair. And this week, Building Blocks DC will be expanding to an additional 17 blocks in wards 5, 7, and 8 to address those communities. And now I want to circle back to a point that I've made, that the chief has made many times, and that is about the very and sometimes fragile ecosystem that makes up our criminal justice system. You've heard me say repeatedly that DC is unique, and we are especially unique when it comes to our criminal justice system. Because we are not a state, the federal government plays an outsized role in our ability to hold people accountable and to deliver justice. The Metropolitan Police Department is, of course, responsible for investigating cases and making arrests. But then the overwhelmingly ability to administer justice is in the hands of the federal government. So we have had many meetings and discussions about how we can get all of our services up in person and operating at 100%. The United States Attorney, for example, has over 2,300 matters awaiting formal charges. And part of, we think, the bottleneck is that we're operating with 2 grand juries instead of 5 grand juries pre-COVID. And many of these cases are unable to move forward, denying justice to both the victims of violent crime and the accused. We can also see some data from the DC Superior Court that shows that the number of pending cases compared to 2019 is up over 74%. We're also going to show some data on prosecutions and the number of unindicted matters and how it has increased over the year. We also can see the effect of these bottlenecks on pretrial services. Not only is the pretrial services population up 25%, The average length of stay is also up 134%. The overall effect is that caseloads are nearly double the pre-COVID supervision level. So here's a summary of what's happening in our system. In January 2020, there were 5,700, just over, criminal cases pending in Superior Court. And as of June 2021, there are 10,199 criminal cases pending in court. So cases are up. Our pre-trial release stay times are also up. The average length of stay at DC jail is up, and the number of indictments are down. And so no matter how you look at it, it reflects that the system isn't working at full capacity, and the administration of justice is delayed for victims, defendants, and the whole city. So it's also not just about getting the courts fully open. We also need the courts to be fully staffed. DC relies on the federal government to fill court vacancies, and there are currently 12 vacancies at the DC Superior Court. So the volume of matters before the court requires a full slate of judges. And the significant backlog of cases increases the urgency to fill these vacancies. So currently, the Judicial Nomination Commission has recommended a number of candidates to fill these vacancies, and our request is for the expeditious nomination and congressional confirmation of these candidates. Of course, our ultimate goal is to become the 51st state where many of the different things I just described wouldn't be necessary. And finally, as I said at the beginning, this isn't just about MPD or what the council can do or what the courts can do. We also have to talk about what the community can do. And we're asking, we're really pleading for you to help us help people before they get involved in violent crime. Or if you know someone who has been involved in violent crime, it's your obligation, it's your moral obligation to help keep the community safe and come forward. And you can get in touch with MPD by texting them at 50411 or calling, and you can be anonymous in making those requests. And we also need the community's help before someone gets involved in crime. And Dell's office has many resources to connect people to, and you should call the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement at 202-807-0440. And so with that, I want to turn to Chief Contee for some MPD specific updates, and then I think we'll be entertaining questions for the whole team.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am Robert J. Contee III, Chief of the Metropolitan Police Department. I stood before you just over a week ago and said we would get justice for 6-year-old Nyiah Courtney. The prayers of the community have been answered. I'm here to announce today that we've got our man. Pursuant to a DC Superior Court arrest warrant, members of the Capital Area Regional Fugitive Task Force arrested 22-year-old Mark Twan Hargraves of Waldorf, Maryland, for first-degree murder while armed, inside an apartment in Southeast DC. As I forecasted, the individual involved was no stranger to the criminal justice system. Detectives made a lot of progress quickly. We also worked very closely with the FBI, U.S. Marshals, and the ATF Washington field offices on this case, and I want to thank them for being here today and all the work they put into this. A special shout out to the U.S. Marshals and MPD detectives of the Special Victims Unit. I'd also like to recognize the community and all of those who've called, texted, prayed, marched, and communicated with our members in order to provide information that helped us bring closure to this senseless act of violence. Today, we have more significant news for our community. As I said when I became your chief of police, I wanted our investigations to be intelligence-led and focused on the most violent offenders in our city. Through focused coordination and intense collaboration with other MPD units, external partners, including embedded FBI, ATF, CSOSA members, and MPD's Violence Reduction Unit, built a strong case against multiple individuals. In early 2021, MPD's Violence Reduction Unit selected high-impact areas of violence within the city to focus its investigation. These locations in Congress Heights West included Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue Southeast, Mellon Street Southeast, and Malcolm X Avenue Southeast, which are also part of the Mayor's Building Blocks Initiative. This case included physical monitoring, controlled purchases, and intelligence through the investigation. What we know is when there is a violent action, we must be laser focused to interrupt the cycle of violence and those with the closest proximity to the violence. I announce today that as part of a federal indictment, 16 individuals are currently in custody charged with narcotics conspiracy in federal U.S. District Court. We are also expecting more arrests. 13 are included in the federal indictment. 11 were arrested during a series of search warrants. Make that 12 were arrested during a series of search warrants here in Washington, D.C. as part of this takedown, all within the footprint of the focus area. A 12th individual was located and incarcerated in Prince George's County. The 13th person remains outstanding. The indictment currently is sealed, but I will say this to that individual. We got your guns, we got your drugs, we've taken your cars, we've got your friends, now we're coming for you. During the execution of search warrants as part of this operation, there were four additional individuals arrested as they were found to be in possession of large amounts of narcotics and firearms. We have recovered a total of 13 firearms directly and indirectly from this operation. We've also recovered various amounts of cocaine, crack, heroin, PCP, pills, U.S. currency. We know that these offenders have a propensity for violent crime, and we are pleased to have made significant progress in removing these criminals from our neighborhoods. MPD is the gateway to the criminal justice system. Everyone, including community and our governmental partners, plays a role in achieving real justice for not only Nyiah, but any victim of violence. Both of these announcements show the impact of community working together with the police department. It cannot be just MPD. If we come together, we can solve and successfully hold violent criminals accountable in our communities. While Nyiah's case is one example of what we can do, there are other murders that have occurred in our city, and I'm pleading with the community to work with us, to work together with us. We know what we can do when we all come together and we all are sick and tired of violence in our communities. When people come forward and bring information, law enforcement is able to do its job, the criminal justice system is able to do its job. I thank you. I want to thank my partners from the federal agencies that are seated at the table with us today for being part of this investigation, for being part of the day-to-day of MPD, and thank you to our mayor for your support in the efforts of the Metropolitan Police Department in getting violent offenders off of our streets.
Thank you, Chief. Excuse me. Thank you. And I think that is our presentation right now. And then we will take on-topic questions. If you would just identify yourself, that would be helpful. Yes, sir.
Thanks for interrupting you,
That's
Mayor.
okay.
It's Paul Duggan from the Washington Post. Chief, we understand that Nyiah's father was named in one of these indictments, at least the sealed indictment. How many days prior to the July 16th shooting was that indictment obtained? And could you talk about in the intervening days, what went on in terms of grabbing up some of these people, including Nyiah's father?
So we were wrapping up. Nyiah's father is one of those that are indicted, and I think it's proper at this point, and we will be releasing these names to the media. But because these individuals were creating havoc in our communities, I think it's important to note these individuals that have been arrested. Ricky Lyles, Cavante Randall, Anthony Graves, Wesley Leak, Sean Wooden, Barry Tyson, Leon Lindsay, Nico Griffin, Desmond Cunningham, Delonte Chappelle, Deshaun Loggins, and then the one individual that's still under seal. But we have been working this investigation for several months. As obviously, we saw that violence was increasing in that area. As a matter of fact, the individual who got shot the day before Nyiah got shot was also one of the indicted individuals. Clearly, there was a focus there. We wrapped up everything as fast as we could, and we started making arrests on Monday.
What was the date of the indictment, the sealed indictment?
Do we have the date of this?
On what day was that obtained?
I don't have the exact date.
Was it
get that
prior to
for
the
you, Paul.
16th?
Say it again?
Was it a number of days prior to July 16th?
It was within close proximity to that. We'll get you the exact date, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Sam?
Chief, what was this about? I mean, have y'all figured out exactly what this was about? Because, right, the guy was shot the day before. They're, shooting on the street. People, innocent people hit as well, people not involved. Have you figured out what?
So that's still under an investigation, Sam, but here's what I'll point out, right? When you have individuals who are in community, whether they're engaged in narcotics trafficking or whatever it is that they're engaged in, a lot of times these behaviors attract violence. So we not only have to focus on individuals who are engaged in violent acts, but we have to look at the individuals that have close proximity to violence. And I think what you'll see in this particular case is that these individuals, while some may have committed violent acts, some individuals are just in close proximity to the violence. When you think about it, I mean, this is not really a new concept. When you think about, if you go back many years, you think about Al Capone as an example. He went to jail for tax evasion. He didn't go to jail for all of the carnage that he created in the community. And we are taking a different look, a more intelligence-led approach to focusing in on violent crime in community. So whatever your thing is that you do, we want to identify what's the legal exposure and really exploit in that space. And sometimes it might not necessarily be on the surface. It might not be that we got this person, on camera or somebody to say that he pulled the trigger, but this person may be in close proximity to violence. And we, at this point, I think it's fair to say that we need to use every tool that we have available to us to hold individuals accountable when they commit violence and they are the target of violence in our community. We have to focus in on those actions.
And you
So
said there were
Sam,
16.
can I just
Yes, ma'am.
jump in for a second? You've covered a lot of community meetings. You've been a lot of places, and you've heard communities say, the police know what they're doing. Why isn't somebody doing something? Everybody knows what's going on. This area was one such area, okay? The people involved are such people. The community members affected said such things. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody can see it. Why isn't anybody doing anything about it? So this is an example for the whole community to know that MPD, you may not see everything that they are doing, but those investigations are happening. They are led by the intelligence that they're finding. They are seeing that there are loose groups of organized activity that may trickle down into all kinds of gunshots and violence, and that these are the violent individuals involved.
We talked.
And this is, unfortunately, if you're engaging in this type of activity, we want to make it very clear that you may not always see it, but the investigations are happening, and we believe that this will make our community safer. So we rather not have to have NPD tracking down 13 people. We rather those 13 people give up what they're doing, contact the Office of Neighborhood and Engagement, and get on a different path. This is one path, being indicted. The young man that was killed before Nyiah, that's another path. What happened to Nyiah? That's unfortunately another path. So we have to stop now. And this is the way, this is part of MPG's charge, but it's also part of building blocks, also part of Office of Neighborhood Engagement to stop it now. Yes, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, for the chief, 16 people arrested. And so basically Nyiah's death is a result of this ongoing thing here.
It's possible, Sam, and that's the thing, right? We don't know if these individuals were targeted specifically because of the activity that they were doing, which we know it's a drug nexus. We don't know if that's the reason why, or if somebody just decided to wake up that morning and just started going shooting at people in that block where a couple of our indicted individuals happen to hang on the regular. I'm not sure exactly what the reason is, but what I know is that the individuals that were in that area, the individuals that were out there day in and day out that the community has been complaining about, they bear, in part, responsibility for this 6-year-old that we've lost in our community. But for their illegal activities in that area, perhaps they were not been targets. Perhaps if they were part of what the other programs that we have to offer, you know, the jobs, the housing, the other things that people in communities say they want. If we got individuals who are on that track, maybe Nyiah would be alive today. But I say, again, as chief of police in the nation's capital, what I say to that is we're going to offer people all of those things. Now perhaps Linda and her team and Dale and his team can go into that community and do some of the work there, now that some of these individuals have been removed from that community. But for the individuals who are intent on causing violence in our community, there is another path. And I'm here to say that the Metropolitan Police Department, you want to get my attention, violence in the community, you've got my attention.
Tom.
Chief, I read, I think, in the New York Times that corner, that notorious corner, that the police have been called since January 1st to that corner or to that liquor store 250-something times just since January 1st. If that's one, is that correct? And two, why is that liquor store still open? You closed it for 96 hours. Why is it still open if it's that much of a community threat?
Well, Tom, that's a good question. The number that you cited, I'm not sure if it's exact, but it's probably in that neighborhood. It's probably in that neighborhood in terms of the number of calls that we've got there. You know, the question is, you know, is it the business that's the problem, or the people that's hanging in front of the business that's causing the problems? That's a question that the community could probably answer for us. Why it's still open, you know, I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is that for the Metropolitan Police Department, our responsibility is when that was brought to the attention of the mayor, and the mayor and I had a conversation following that, that business was closed down for what the law legally allows me to do, close it down for the 96 hours. Subsequent information from community, from law enforcement, has to be provided to the alcohol beverage regulatory agency for them to make assessments about whether or not this business needs to continue to be closed. So okay. I'm sure those assessments are being made.
Seemed a little bureaucratic to me, but let me ask you a more direct question. Okay. You just answered a moment ago, but was the 6-year-old targeted? You said she might have been targeted, she could have been targeted. Isn't it clear that the 6-year-old, the family that was there, was targeted?
It's possible, and here's why I'm saying that, Tom. It's possible because the individual involved, I mean, unless the individual who pulled the trigger tells me that, I don't know that for certain.
Is it probable or likely? I mean, is it probable or possible?
I think it's possible. Her father was out there in the block. It was 11 o'clock, after 11 o'clock at night. He ended up getting shot. Several other people ended up getting shot. He's part of this indictment. The individual who was shot the day before, who was part of the indictment, he also got shot nearby. I think it's, you know, I mean, I think you move from the realm of possibility to the realm of probability, but that's, again, something that will come out in the courts. I'm not certain.
The reason I'm asking is because it's tragic the 6-year-old dies no matter what the circumstances, but it changes the tenor of what happened. This wasn't just some casual drive-by shooting. This was a targeted event.
That's unfortunate. Next question.
Chief,
hold on for a second.
yeah,
Let's go to Paul. You've got an opportunity. Yes, Paul.
For Mayor and or the Chief, and we heard Chief Conti last week talking about the courts and the problems with getting you point out that there's only 2 grand juries working. There's a huge backlog in cases. If the court comes back and says the reason for this is because either the juries won't come in and work because of COVID, or they're going to blame COVID for this problem, is that a legitimate excuse, and how do you get around that?
We don't think it is, and I don't, at this point, and that they have to speak for themselves. The courts aren't in my purview. Certainly, we work in partnership with all of our agency partners. We've held some very productive discussions with all of our criminal justice partners, including offering our support facilities on facilities issues. So if the question is about the size of the facilities or the air filtration, the DC government can assist with that, as we have done with other non-DC government entities during our entire COVID response. So we can facilitate that. We also take the position that there don't need to be space limitations in our public buildings. And that's the position that we take, and that's what the science suggests. And so I think that answers your question. Does that answer your question?
Mayor, is the problem that because the federal government oversees the vast majority of the court system, that you just don't have the jurisdiction over the federal court system to tell them to get going?
Well, that's exactly right.
So that's the issue.
Well, I think that's the issue for the courts. And so the issue for all of us, however, that's not the only issue, is that we need to, including us, this is why, some people ask me, well, Bowser, why are you making DC government workers come to work in person? Well, their jobs are in person. For a lot of the services we provide. So the Office of Neighborhood Safety, DYRS, are DC government agencies that offer some of these services to offenders or people who we don't want to engage in crime. And so we have a lot of services, and some people engage better in person. And so that's where we are. The federal government also has supervising agencies. You all report a lot about people who part of their sentence or part of their return is wearing an ankle bracelet. Well, guess what? There's services that go with that. And we want those services to be offered at drop-in centers during call-ins and check-ins. All of these things happen to make sure that we have safe communities. And we think those things need to also happen in person. So we have done, and we have worked very hard to keep our case counts low and our vaccination rates up. And I'm proud of DC residents for doing that. I'm also proud of them for following mask guidelines, and I'll be also proud of them if they're called for jury service. And I don't know that they have been, so I'm not saying people aren't showing up because I don't know that they've been called. We'll also participate in that. Having our system work means that victims get justice, but also defendants get speedy trials. And we know that is the hallmark of an efficient system.
Paul, if I can just build on what the mayor just said for a second. I think the important piece, one of the important pieces to highlight as the mayor, talks about this is that, I'm certainly not saying that, hey, open the courts and the problem goes away. I think that this is a pivotal moment for us here in the nation's capital, right? We have an opportunity. We've talked about reimagining, law enforcement for the last 18, 20 months. The Metropolitan Police Department has been reimagining for years, but in that space, we have an opportunity to look at our criminal justice system. The system is more than just courts. It's an opportunity to look at our system to see if the system aligns with what our community's expectations are. And I think that's the thing here that's really being missed. Do our sentences align with what we think they should be when individuals do certain things in community? All of that stuff works together, right? When we talk about people cooperating with the police, if people are back out in community, a robber or murderer or whatever it is, it's hard to get people to cooperate. So we have to ask ourselves the question, how does that happen? What's community's role in this? Who sits on juries? Community members sits on juries. So it's an opportunity for us, and I want to make sure that we seize this moment and not focus squarely on it's just the courts. It's an opportunity for us in our city to look at the entire ecosystem to see whether or not it aligns with the values of the communities that we serve.
Chief,
Okay,
I just want to be...
let me, Julie, Mitch, Stephanie, sorry, Nick, James. Is that James? Okay, James.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Bowser.
Yes.
I wanted to ask about your proposal of spending $11 million to hire more police officers. First of all, you said when you proposed your budget a few months ago that the hiring pipeline takes a while to get started and that you had proposed as many officers as MPD could hire.
Yep.
What's changed? Why can they suddenly hire more, in your opinion? And second of all, where's that $11 million going to come from between now and Tuesday?
Sure. So thank you for that question. And what I asked MPD to do is to look very closely at the applications and vetting process, which they were already doing to get ready for hiring next year. And in that review, they have identified candidates who could become active again. And allow us to hire more officers. So what we will propose will take us from the 135 recruits that I had in my proposal to 255 recruits. It will also allow us to convert, instead of 55 cadets to the academy, it will allow us to, is that the total? Total of 55 instead of 25, which is an addition of 30. And it will also allow us to look at 40 total senior police officer positions.
And where is the money coming from?
We will make a recommendation to the council with the current dollars. We have not identified the adjustments that will need to be made, but we will between now and then. Yes.
So I'm wondering, is there, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe officers were in the areas where Nyiah was shot and in the blocks surrounding Nats Park. So I'm wondering, where is the evidence or the data points to show that more police officers equals lower crime?
Well, we know that we want more police presence, and the only way that we're really sustaining the presence that we need right now is the use of overtime, and that's not a sustainable solution.
Right. So, but is there data to show that more officers equals lower crime?
There's certainly data to show that DC residents want police in their neighborhoods. And it's the case whether it is on Mellon Street, 14th Street, Kennedy Street. People want to make sure that we have the police presence that is necessary.
And a similar question with regard to some of the focus on, I guess, pending cases lingering in the court system. Is there, do you also have data on recidivism, for example, showing that these folks who are released while their cases are pending are then reoffending?
We can certainly get you the data that we have about that. And we also know, however, that just the swelling caseloads means fewer people who are responsible for oversight of their supervision. We just know that that supervision is spread more thin. Is that your question?
Yes, essentially. I'm also interested to hear from Director Linda Harley-Harper about building blocks. I'm wondering if you could just kind of explain like what the program is doing. Are there any outcomes you can report, accomplishments? How's it going, essentially?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for your question. Building Blocks has been actively building every day, ever since February 17th when the mayor announced Building Blocks initial inception. We have been building a really quality and talented team of DC government employees from across the district to build a team who is taking a strong look. We have researchers and data people who are taking a strong look at all of the shootings that happen in the district and analyzing the data, working very closely with MPD and their data folks. We have community-based organizations that are partnering with us in our efforts to do person and place-based services. We have partnered with local campaigns that are doing public information campaigns to help spread the word of anti-gun violence. We have partnered with the No Slide Zone and the Rest in Peace, no, help me. With, yes, Rest in Peace. Tom Brown. Excuse me. We have two public campaigns that we have partnered with. And we are working closely with those community-based organizations who are spreading the word of anti-gun violence in our communities. And they are credible in their own right, and the communities are responding by supporting, becoming a part of the campaigns. And just yesterday, they led a march for justice for Nyiah. We're also doing person and place-based services in our communities. We're going in, doing environmental assessments, and also partnering with the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement in order to provide services. The mayor has proposed $59 million for next year. We are working actively, which is a record number of dollars, federal dollars, that are going towards public safety. And we're actively working with all of the agencies who play a role in the district government in public safety, and working with them in order to figure out exactly what is the best way for us to utilize the dollars, to assess the data and figure out what's needed, and to approach public safety from a standpoint of a community-led effort. And so we also have launched a community-based grants program where we released $750,000 into the community, where residents have applied for grants, and local nonprofit organizations have also applied for grants, which we will be announcing the winners on Friday.
My understanding is that the program targets, I think, a small number of people who the district has identified as responsible for a large number of crimes, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong in that summary, but how are those people identified and by whom?
So a lot of people are coming forward saying that they want to live a different lifestyle, and that is what Building Blocks is for. For persons who have been involved in crime, who want a different lifestyle, that's the purpose of Building Blocks. We want to work with you. We want to work in partnership with the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement in order to engage with those persons, figure out what it is that they need, and to get them on another path. We are also working very closely with all of the violence interrupters and the credible messengers, and those people who are in our communities every day, our Parks and Recreation roving leaders who are in our communities every day, who are able to identify those persons who are ready to make a different change and need some support and some services and opportunities.
Who was next?
Right here. Right here.
Mayor, right here.
Yes.
Yeah. Mayor Bowser, I'm wondering about, you mentioned a lot of ways that the city, the community can, take action towards gun violence. In speaking to community members over the past week, they've told me and are wanting to know if you're thinking about announcing a public health emergency towards gun violence, and thinking that that might be the best approach in, attacking it head on.
Well, we already did that in creating Building Blocks, and I'm happy to share with you the mayor's order that outlines the creation of an emergency operations center.
Is it working the same, similar to the way that the emergency towards COVID-19, whereas you saw all hands on deck and more money being put in and that kind of thing?
It is in that we created an emergency operations center in response to COVID. That's exactly what we did. We also detailed government officials from agencies all across the district to work in the Gun Violence Emergency Operations Center. We made available some emergency funds at the start, and we also have pretty significant budget investment in all of these programs, $55 million, some of which was advanced to start before the fiscal year starts and get on the ground this summer. I want to be clear, Linda just mentioned some outreach dollars that are placed in, you said this Friday, some of those disbursements will be made to community organizations that already may have some programs on the street that are working, that we've vetted and are making investments in as well.
Are you guys looking at any additional educational programs, maybe, so that way, you know, young kids and those teenagers who are starting to become involved in this can, you know, go towards those other options that Chief Courtney was mentioning before?
We have a plethora of programs. What we're not lacking is programs. Okay, and part of our challenge is to make sure that we're investing in programs that people trust and programs that work. And the Pathways program that is run out of Director McFadden's office is one such program. It's intense. It concentrates on a few people. I like it to, you know, we all want these programs to be bigger, but the fact is we offer some intense services, and all of those things are important. And talking about our young people, if we already have young people who are criminally justice involved, our DYS programs are also provide intense services for those young people and credible messengers that are assigned to them to keep them safe. We think that the best programs for kids are at school. And that's why we're very focused on summer school, which is really going well all across DCPS, and getting kids back into full-time school and activities around school. When they're at school, we also have so many more checkpoints for them for their behavioral health, if they're in need of a social work support, and that also gives us a line into their family. So people think I'm insanely focused on school reopening, which I have been since last August, but it is another part of our ecosystem for neighborhood safety. Yes?
Follow-up question to
Sure.
your remarks earlier on the court system. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So are you saying that people who are awaiting charges, they're out in the community, and are they committing additional violent crimes? Is that what you're saying?
If someone, they could be.
There,
Go ahead, Chief.
there are some, yes. We know that for certain. Most recently, we had an individual commit involved in a homicide with an ankle bracelet, with an ankle monitor on. Yeah, absolutely. We have individuals in our community that are being monitored all the time. They're under high intensity, maximum supervision, the maximum you can get, who commit violent crimes in our community every day. And the gentleman over here raised a question earlier. I think, you know, if you look at some of the studies that have been done, and it's escaping me right now who did it most recently, but you know, the recidivism rate for those that are involved in violent crime, that's what we got to keep our focus. It is very high. It's over 50%, somewhere in the 60 percentile of people who are involved in violent crime in our communities, especially violent gun crime at that oftentimes we find out here they recidivate. And that's unfortunate. As the mayor mentioned, we have an astounding amount of programs here in our city. Right now is a pivotal moment. I mean, investments that have never been made in areas, the mayor has put that on the table this year to make those investments for people to take advantage of. Some people will not take advantage of those. And when they commit violent crimes in our community, what are we going to do about it?
Chief and Mayor, I've heard both of you talk about accountability in the aftermath of some of these shootings. What does accountability look like? If you could be specific on what accountability looks like to you. If you could put a metric on it, is that more people in jail? What's that look like to you?
It's our community being rid of people who make our communities unsafe. There are people in our communities that have a sickness, right? They have drug addiction. I get that. They steal, they break into cars. I get that. I can understand it. God knows I know. Watch my father all my life. involved. I get that. He never went out and harmed anybody. But on the accountability side of it, and this is where the community has to really understand. Most people don't understand DC's criminal justice system because we're unlike anybody else in the country. That's fact. Most people don't understand it. But when we talk about, let's say, you know, a guy who goes to jail for robbery, I'll just use that as an example. Is it okay for a guy, if the sentence that's imposed, and certainly the judges, they have their authority to impose whatever sentence they want, but does it align with where our community values are? Does a guy who sticks a gun in your face and rob you at gunpoint, should that guy be back out in community within 12 months? Is that okay with community? Or less than that? Or he's back out in community waiting his trial. Is that okay? I'm not making an indictment one way or other. All I'm saying is I've been all around this community talking to people, hundreds, thousands of people. And what I hear is that people really don't understand the system. They make an assumption that there's accountability. And I'm telling you that from doing this job for 30 years, that there is a piece that's missing there, and we have to focus on it. We have to shine the light on it, and we have to call it what it is. And if the community is okay with that, if we're okay, a guy who robbed somebody, 12 months or whatever, he's back on, or he's out waiting trial, and the community is great with that, then hey, I've done my job. But I have a responsibility to shine light on it for the community to make that assessment.
Question from James, right?
James?
Chief Conte, you and I both know that on the streets of D.C., there is a culture of no snitching, and that if you get caught snitching, something may take place. What is the police department doing in order to break down that culture of no snitching?
Thank you for bringing that. That is an excellent question. I'm glad you brought that up. So let's talk about that for a minute, right? That culture is not new to our city. I remember hearing that from being a kid. Mind your business. We don't talk to the police. We don't do this. We don't do that. I remember that as a kid. But think about what's the conversation now. We're talking about the police engaging community. We want to see more engagement. How do we have more engagement when we saying we don't want to talk to the police? If you think about the safest neighborhoods in the country, those are neighborhoods where police and community work together. What we have to do, and this is what I saw again, being a kid, the reason why do we have a no snitching culture? Why do we have that? We have that because people are in fear when those murderers, when those robbers, when they show back up in the neighborhood. If that guy who you know robbed or murdered, he lived right next door to you and he back in community, how inclined are you to cooperate with the police? What we have to do is what I'm trying to demonstrate with this indictment. When we get these individuals, we hold them accountable for their actions. Notice I said that there is a federal conspiracy indictment for these individuals. I don't think you're going to be seeing them in community next week.
So let me also just say this, James. Community members do talk to police. Okay, the idea that they don't is not true, and the chief will probably tell you when he gets that type of cooperation and tips, that's when we can close cases the fastest. And he's already talked about how that leads to more safety in the community. The community has to know that the justice system works. They have to know that it's legitimate, that when they call the police come. When the police see a crime, something happens. When the cases go, they're good cases, and a jury of their peers makes a decision. Absolutely. People have to know that the system works. They have to. That's why we trust it, and that's why we turn over our public safety to the police department and the government. So all of those pieces working. None of us is here to say you didn't do this and you should do that, you should do this. That's not what we're about. But we are about making sure that every piece of the ecosystem is working to demonstrate to our citizens that this whole process is a legitimate one that will work for their public safety. We have to be able to do that. And I frequently come up and say, text MPD, and that this isn't a reward. This is a $60,000 reward in the case of little Miss Nyiah Courtney. And in 2020, for example, we issued over $300,000 in rewards for tips leading to a conviction. And that helped us make arrests in 41 homicides. In 2020 also, we gave out $48,000 in firearms-related reward payments. And to date in 2021, we've given out $161,000 reward payments related to 13 homicides and $22,000 related to firearm rewards. So it is not true that people don't talk to the police, okay? Because they are fed up with people in their communities being harmed, and they know, and they don't want to see any more carnage. Some of these people know that a crime happened, and they're scared another one's going to happen. All right? So it's just simply not true that people don't talk to us. We keep information anonymously. In some cases, we would also recommend protection for people who have information related to a crime. So we're grateful to those residents, and we're grateful to the residents who will come forward in the future. Yes.
Hi, Mayor. Last time you were on our air, you had pointed to the council making sure there's funding for officers needed, and we followed up with Councilmember Charles Allen, who essentially said that the council's already doing what you asked for fiscal year 2022, and basically said that you're both on the same page there. Given your announcement today, how do you answer? Are you both on the same page, you and the DC Council, when it comes to DC police hires?
That's not exactly true. For the police department and the council's first vote, we recommended 135 new officers and 50 new police cadets. 100 new police cadets. And I think their first vote funded 50 new police cadets. So that's not exactly, we're basically on the same page with new police hires, but not cadets. And what we have, I asked Chief Conti after MPD and Director Reed also went through how we could reactivate a pipeline and get people interested in coming to work for us. And when what we've laid out, we gave the council a heads up this morning that we will be submitting a different proposal.
And a follow-up to that, if I may, two more follow-ups, one for the chief
Yep.
as well. Mayor, for you, we've heard the chief talk very personally about addressing crime during his career in the district. You're from here. You've been working, addressing crime for many years as mayor. What is your personal response of what it's been like seeing increases in homicides year after year more recently? And then also your overall message to the community that things are actually going to be addressed differently this time around?
Well, I don't want to see any crime happen in our city, anywhere in our city at any time. And I feel very strongly about people who use guns. And I feel very strongly about going into neighborhoods where law-abiding people live in fear. And that is too many communities in our city. So my commitment is to make sure that we're doing everything that the government can do to improve public safety for those neighbors. It is true, this is my hometown, and I've lived through a lot worse in DC. And none of us will tolerate the wanton use of guns in our city. And we have so many more programs and services, from mental health and substance abuse to job training into working with people when they've come home from serving time away. So we have a lot more programs and services to offer people, and that's exactly what we're going to do. My experience in working with all of our government officials responsible for public safety is to give them the resources that they need and to make sure we're investing in things that work and adjusting whenever and wherever we need to address the problem at hand.
Can I just follow up with the chief, if that's okay? Chief, can you talk about what kicked off this federal indictment and why you decided to go after conspiracy here?
Violence. That's it, violence. We're doing, as I said, we've been taking an intelligence-led approach to focusing on violent crime in our city. So one of the things that I've asked our team to do, and again, this is before today, is as we look at communities across our city, let's look at the communities where the most pain in terms of violent crime is occurring. And this community certainly popped up on the radar as one of those communities. We looked at sounds of gunshots. We looked at prior homicides. We looked at shootings. We looked at all of the violent stuff that's out there. Every data point that we could focus on, we focused on to really kind of narrow this down. And as I said, while this is one community that we've just wrapped this case up, but there's still some investigation that's ongoing. The violence is what really gets the attention. So as we see, violence concentrated in certain areas within our community, that's what's going to get our attention.
Yes, Mark.
Yes, so if I could go back to Mitch's question and your commitment to him, and something the chief said. So when you're talking about these people who are on release, pending trial, under supervision, reoffending during that time, and I believe the mayor made this commitment, but you'll release data to support that for us? Because I can tell you my news organization has been asking for that data from your office, chief, for some time.
Right.
So you will
let me work with our team to see what we can release. We'll release what we can release. Quite frankly, if this is a reason that I can't, then I will not, obviously. But I think it's important for a community to know that. I can tell you that when we look at, Nyiah Courtney is the exception, right? But when we look at our violent offenders who commit homicides, and we look at our victims in many cases, right? Not in all cases, because there are clearly some exceptions. But a lot of time, and this is nothing new what I'm getting ready to say. It's almost like you're looking at the same person in terms of number of contacts with the criminal justice system for violent crimes. I think last year may have come down a bit. The average may have been like 10 touch points for robbery, different crimes that people have committed, and I think it was 10 touch points or interactions the prior year, and last year it may have been like 9 or something. But these individuals they're no strangers to us. It's a small amount of people. In a city of over 700,000 people, we're talking about a small amount of people. And what I want to focus on is the most violent in our community, to really make our community safer. And really, the message, if you take away nothing else from this, I think that that's something that we all can get around. I don't care what ward you live in. I think we can all get around the fact that we want violent criminals who make our communities unsafe off the street.
And so just one other thing on data, Mark. We participated in a group called the Criminal Justice CJCC Coordinating Council.
Yes.
That is all of our kind of federal and local justice partners, and they have a very good data capability. So one thing I've asked them to do is kind of look at the COVID closures, the impact of COVID and what it's done to kind of our system by the numbers. And that may be the best kind of data product that we can share with you, because what it also allows us to do is to see what it's going to take to knock those numbers down and to get where we need to be. That's why you hear me talking so much about being at 100% capacity for our agencies and for their agencies, because getting the capacity up is how we'll be able to knock down those numbers.
If I could just follow up with 2 quick questions. Chief, in a lot of these cases, or in some of these cases anyway, you already have crime cameras pre-positioned. Can you remind me, are you allowed to monitor those in real time, and would you like to be able to monitor those in real time?
We don't currently monitor those in real time. There's a process that we have to go through. I think that there are times, and certainly there's a process where we have to make notification about any active monitoring that we're going to be doing on cameras. But I think in some neighborhoods that could be helpful. Some people commit, we had a recent double homicide with a camera right there. And, sometimes people commit violent crimes even with the camera present. I think in terms of the monitoring, that issue itself gets a little dicey, Big Brother, all that kind of thing. But I do think that in some communities where we're seeing, sustained violence or something, or repeated violent acts, that there may be some advantage to doing that.
And Chief, can I follow up on the mayor's request for more police officers to fully open the courts and to reduce the backlog at USAO? Can you tell the citizens how that would reduce homicides, if in fact you believe those three things would reduce homicides?
So what I think that it will do, I think it will address many of the concerns that we are having in community. Will it stop all? Will we not have one? I wouldn't take it that far to say that, but what I do know, based upon my experiences, my interaction, is that when we see these individuals who have repeatedly committed violent crimes in community back on the street, they're not getting jobs. They're out here doing what they do. And there's something that we need to do as community in response to that. And that is, as the mayor mentioned, whether we think differently about what our court system actually looks like, does a grand jury have to necessarily convene in the court building, as an example, if there are other facility opportunities that exist? All of those things need to be explored. And I think all of those things are working together. And I should not, I would be remiss if I didn't add into there the other investments that the mayor has made. This is a pivotal moment, and I don't want it to be lost in what I'm saying by somebody just grabbing, the chief said, if we open the courts, that's going to solve all the things. No, it's all of this working together. Linda and Dale, they do incredibly important work in communities to offer people a different path, to give people a fair shot, to say, if you don't want to be involved in this, there are opportunities. We're telling people to put guns down, and we're saying, hey, here's another opportunity. But if you don't, we as community are rallying around the issue of gun violence, and we're not going to tolerate it. So all of those things, Mark, working together, I think is what gets us to a safer community where we're seeing less homicides, less violent crime in our communities.
Yep.
Hi, Mayor. So you met with the president a few weeks ago about gun violence prevention. As you continue to push DC statehood, what are the conversations with the president like when you bring up these kind of bureaucratic issues that you're facing with the inability to reopen courts on your own and being at the mercy of the federal government? And is it helping sway Congress to push DC statehood?
No, I don't think it's helping Congress to push DC statehood. And we've made every case that there is to be made about DC statehood, including having the ability to appoint the National Guard, to oversee the National Guard, which we think has a very significant impact on our safety. I do think fewer people understand that the federal courts prosecute DC crimes. And so this is another thing that people don't understand about our unique status. I think that answers your question. Okay. But let me just say, my discussion at the White House included talking about how we need the whole criminal justice system open. I'm grateful to have had a follow-up conversation with the Attorney General who indicated that he would make the federal grand juries available for the Superior Court. So that's something, but we want the whole system to be up and running at 100%. Yes.
7 News has spent a lot of time speaking with community members in Southeast DC who are scared, frightened that gunshots are going off in their community regularly. This morning I spoke with a woman whose grandson was killed. Some of these people don't feel listened to. What's your message to people in Southeast DC, Mayor and Chief?
This is my message to every Washingtonian, that we're going to do everything within our power to keep our neighborhoods safe. The police and violence interruption programs in DC government are focused on doing exactly that. My job as mayor is to tell everybody what we need. To hold our officials accountable for doing it, and to work with community members to make sure that we're stopping crime before it happens and holding people accountable who are violent in our communities.
Mayor?
Yes.
Can I ask two
Okay.
Rachel Carizzi is
Hey,
here.
Chief, I just wanted to be, I want to be clear on something you said
Where is
before.
it? Oh,
Right here,
I
yeah.
got you, I'm sorry.
It's not definite, but it's possible and maybe probable that Nyiah's father was the target that night and that the shooting related to the drug activities he allegedly was involved in. I think that's what you said, am I right?
Okay,
Is that right?
yes.
Okay. So knowing that if law enforcement had, or you or law enforcement had grabbed up Nyiah's father off of this indictment before that night, Nyiah might be alive today. I just wonder if you could talk about how that sits with you at night in your private moments.
Yeah, sure.
Not just as a police chief, but as a human being. And I got one small question after
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. I think the reality is, I operate with a sense of urgency, right? And I'm hopeful that as we talk about thinking about through the criminal justice system, I hope that we all reevaluate and think about, are we operating with a sense of urgency? When cases go over or warrants go over to prosecutors, are we operating with a sense of urgency? When the cases leave from the prosecutors and the person is arrested, you know, for our team, are we catching them as quickly as we possibly can? I mean, clearly we're not able to round up 13 people that are all over the place over the course of 24 hours. That doesn't happen. But yes, there's something that I think about. In my private time, in my time as chief of police, it's what I wake up and what I think about. Are we doing everything that we can as a city with a sense of urgency? This has been my message from day one. You know, for some people, when the pain comes to your front door, it's a different response versus people who are living in community, as this gentleman just mentioned, who are, you know, worried about a bullet that's going to fly through their window. Some people are scared around. So we all of us have to be working in a space of it's urgent. You can't wait until a 6-year-old loses her life before you start calling in tips to the police about people who are out there carrying guns. I would have loved to have got a tip that the guy who shot Nyiah, that he was carrying a gun. I would have loved to have gotten a tip before he shot Nyiah. I would love to have gotten a tip before then. So again, every time these questions come up, as people direct them to the police, I'm going to say as an entire system, because the system means we should be working together. So how is the system really looking at this space? Are we operating with a sense of urgency? These guys from the Marshal Service that are present here, they know I've been hounding every single day, almost hourly. Where are we? Where are we? Where is he? Can we find this guy? That's important, and that's a sense of urgency. But I can tell you in my 30 years experience, I know that does not happen all the way across government, whether it's federal or local. It doesn't always happen that way. And we got to operate in that space when it comes to violent crime, because lives depend on it.
Was Nyiah's father wounded that night? That's a thing.
Yes, he was.
He was. Could you
Yes.
talk about, was he seriously wounded? Did he go to the hospital?
No, he was shot. He did go to a hospital. He was released the next day, and we placed him under arrest. And I think there were several news cameras that were on the scene when we placed him under arrest the next day.
One last thing, Chief, and I don't want
I
to.
gotta go to somebody else so we can wrap up, man. Sorry, this right here, and then we gotta wrap up. I know I got another situation I got to deal with. So,
Yeah, this question is about the backlog at the DC Superior Court. In statements, you've said that the backlog is upwards of 10,000 cases compared to a little bit more than 5,000 a year and a half ago. I'm wondering, of those more than 10,000, how many of them are for violent crimes? And my other question related to the backlog is that we've seen backlogs throughout the country. Is it your position that DC Superior Court is uniquely sluggish in handling these cases during the pandemic?
So let me answer the first part. Let me try to answer that for you. So when you talk about felony cases, they're close to about 500 of that 10,000. 500 that are felony one cases that run the gamut of all things that are not good for people in community. So I think that's the first issue. 500 cases, that's a lot, right? And to the second part of that, I think that you're probably going to find that there are some communities or some places across country that may be doing it better than others, but I think that this is an issue. Again, we're the nation's capital, and there's a spotlight that's shined on us right now. And my statement is that as we look at this issue, these are issues that we should look at all around the country, because guess what? There's violent crime that's up in every major city across our country. Are we doing this type of deep dive to really hone in on what the issue is? Or do we want to just keep it a surface conversation? Oh, the police locked them up, oh, they got out. It's deeper than that. And until we get deeper than that, and I get it, sometimes reporters don't have an opportunity to really kind of go deep into those issues. But if you really want to get to the issue, go to the pain point. That's the pain point.
Last question. Are there any other on topics? Yep.
OUC in the 911 call center, there have been reports of, understaffing, problems there, still delays in response to some calls. Can you give us an assessment on where you stand on getting a permanent director in there and what's going on? And Chief, I wouldn't mind hearing from you on this. Are you satisfied with what, your guys are calling 911, are in that loop too. Are you satisfied with how things operate at the OUC?
Well, let me just say this, Chief. We are recruiting. I don't have anything to report on the recruitment. OUC is obviously a very important part of our public safety system as well. And all of our directors, MPD, Fire and EMS included, work to make that system safer. Let me say something about our OUC employees. I've said this frequently. When I became mayor, these were among the most stressed out employees in DC government. And during and over the last 6 years, we've been able to hire more 911 operators. We hadn't done any hiring in 8 years prior to that. We've been able to offer more training and something else, rest. And they too have been impacted by COVID. They've been impacted by other pretty serious personnel issues there. They lost a beloved employee. And now they are we are still searching for a new director. So we're going to make sure that our staff and team there have everything that they need to be successful. All right, that's it. So is that it on the public safety, Chief? Thank you, and I know you got to get out of here. Sam, what's your question?
Yep. Commissioner Adolfo is leading a protest today.
And thank you to our federal partners.
Holiday Liquors. He had led a protest against the Mart Liquors where Nyiah was shot. What's your opinion about this? In terms of people protesting liquor stores, do you think that there are too many out there?
Are you talking about the ABRA process of a protest or
Well, yeah, what they did, what Adolfo did, he's led a protest against this particular liquor store where the shooting occurred.
When you say protest, what do you mean by protest? Like he was holding up a sign, or he was part of the ABRA process?
He was both holding up a sign, and he was also challenging, as an A&C commissioner, the renewal of the license. And so they're doing the same thing, I understand, with another liquor store, Holiday Liquors, this evening. What are your thoughts about citizens doing
I think that the citizens should engage the ABRA process, and before engaging the ABRA process, if they have complaints, they need to also make those complaints known.
Thank you. Just very quickly on the call center, is the person who's the interim now, is that person in the running to possibly be the director?
I don't have anything to say about the recruitment.
Okay, let me ask you the COVID question.
Okay.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has just announced, I apologize for my voice, has just announced that all state employees, several 100,000, will have to be vaccinated, proof of vaccination, or be tested weekly, and hospital patient-facing employees will have to be vaccinated. Where do we stand now, given the Delta variant? Where are you now with the public health emergency over? Are we going to have to do something like that, or are you satisfied that enough people in this city are vaccinated?
I'm not going to be satisfied until every person is vaccinated. And there's still a lot of eligible people who need to be vaccinated. I don't have any reason to think that our employees are outliers, that probably most are vaccinated, some are not. We have been investigating over the last several weeks how to approach vaccine certifications for our employees, and we continue to investigate that. Now, we may be different than some places in that all our employees are back to work in person, and so we're very satisfied with our return to work and how it's progressing.
But public-facing employees are more likely to have some kind of requirement than just general employees.
I didn't say that.
I thought I said that in the question.
Oh, yeah, I didn't say that in my response.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes.
You talked about how important you felt it was for students to be able to go back to school in person, a lot of reasons to access a lot of the services that you've been talking about for the past hour. Are you concerned that a rise in cases could impact those back-to-school plans?
I am not. And I feel very, very confident in our preparation for the start of school on August 30th.
Julie? As Tom noted, we are no longer in a public health emergency for the first time in a long, long time, and I wanted to ask about what the practical effects of that are. Does this mean that the travel guidance no longer applies? Does this mean that if you needed to impose mask rules again, you would need to start a new public health emergency?
We are, as you know, Julie, I maintained a public emergency, which continues to allow me to respond in an emergency way. In the practical effect of the public health emergency largely has to do with commercial activity.
So children who travel still have to follow those rules about quarantining, not going back to school or camp?
I'm pretty sure the DOH guidance is controlling.
Okay, and are you considering mask rules again now that the CDC has said that that's back on the table?
We are following public health guidance. Dr. Nesbitt and her team continue to review where we are and if we need to do anything differently. And if we have a change in posture, we'll communicate that. And I have the authority with the existing emergency to do that.
Are there, one more question, sorry. Are there new metrics? We used to have the red, yellow, green metrics that no longer apply in some cases now that people are vaccinated. Are there new metrics that say when we hit hospitalizations at a certain level or something like that, that's when we'll need masks, that's when we'll need more restrictions?
No, we don't have a new system of metrics other than the new report. I think DOH is reporting that weekly on our experience with infection after vaccination, bi-weekly. Yes, sir.
Some more questions on building blocks for Director Harper. So you mentioned that the program is working with several agencies collaborating. I'm wondering specifically if Building Blocks is plugged into the Pathways program and the Cure the Streets out of the Attorney General's office, and how, if so, how that collaboration works.
Thank you for your question. So yes, we are working in partnership with the Office of the Attorney General. We are working in partnership with the Office of the Attorney General, and the Attorney General has actually detailed a senior manager to the Building Blocks office and has been in full partnership ever since the launch of Building Blocks. We recently held a Unity Summit that brought all of the street outreach workers together, and all of the Cure the Streets persons were a part of that, along with our city-funded violence interrupters.
And I'm also wondering, so I believe the council in the NEAR Act passed several years ago called for a multi-pronged, multi-government approach to violence, which sounds a lot like what Building Blocks is. I'm wondering if Building Blocks is intended to be that, what's called for in the NEAR Act, or if it's different, or can you distinguish it in any way from what the NEAR Act called for?
So the NEAR Act established the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, so I will defer to Director McFadden.
Yeah, so the NEAR Act established the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, as Director Holly Harper stated. The idea around Building Blocks was being the glue and being the body to pull all those agencies together so that we could make sure that we have tailored services for this small group of individuals that's playing a role in violence here in the district. And that's exactly what we've been doing, working We're on a call every morning to address these issues around violence, working with the violence interrupters and cure the streets as well. So we're working and have additional funding to do some amazing work within the next 12 months, and that's what we're looking forward to.
How much funding?
It's around $58 million for building blocks for the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. We're moving from $10.3 to $28.1 million for FY22.
And I have two more questions for you, Mayor Bowser, if I can. President Biden announced his pick for the U.S. Attorney for D.C., Matthew Graves, I believe is his name. Do you have any reaction to that? Have you corresponded or talked with Mr. Graves?
I haven't yet. And so we welcome we welcome the new U.S. Attorney, and I will look forward to meeting him.
And then, sorry, one question on off public safety. My understanding is that the rapid rehousing program is something like 500 or 600 people are nearing a cliff where their subsidy will end, I think, at the end of this month or maybe in September. So I'm wondering if the new revenue that the council approved through this tax increase will impact that cliff for those residents, or how is DHS looking at how to prevent these people from being evicted?
Jenny, do you want to respond?
I'm happy to respond to that. So DHS works with all families to make sure that that are in the rapid rehousing program, that they have stable housing. So if they are ending or getting up near the end of their term, they would work with them to make sure that they have a safe place to stay. They're not going to just kick them out and evict them. We did see a lot of people stay longer in the program during the COVID-19 public health crisis. We didn't want to move a lot of people around. So there are resources that are available within the Department of Human Services budget, within our emergency rental assistance from the federal government, to help work with those families. The funding that the council passed is largely for permanent supportive housing, which is a different type of service for people who need long-term housing, for people who need intensive case management services. So we will work with DHS and those families to make sure that they continue to have safe places and they're not going to just wind up back on the street.
So permanent supportive housing is not necessarily the help that rapid rehousing folks would get? Is that what you're saying?
Right. There are a lot of different tools in our toolbox to respond to the affordable housing challenge. Rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing are different tools. You can move from program to program depending on your needs and how we find out what services you need, but they're for two different types of populations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor. The CDC guidance links whether people should be wearing masks to community transmission, and we've seen some conflicting information about whether DC is in, quote, like moderate transmission or substantial. What is your sense of where we're at right now, and what's the best way DC residents can get accurate information about it? And if we are in a substantial transmission phase, will you reinstitute a mask mandate?
As I said, the director, Dr. Nesbitt, is reviewing all of our